Welcome back to another week in review. We're looking at the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ futures for the week of February 24th. Just to get things started here, we'll look at data very quickly. Just bring up for the Forex Factory calendar. I used to list this off, but I think it's just easier to bring this up so you can have the visual as well. So not a ton of data this week, really. I think primary thing we're going to be concerned about here, Tuesday consumer confidence at 10 a.m. will be interesting to see if there's any reaction there. Monday, not really much on Monday. Consumer confidence Tuesday, and then I think the big areas of focus will be Wednesday after hours for Nvidia earnings, which obviously aren't listed on this calendar, but Nvidia earnings are Wednesday after hours, which will be incredibly important. Thursday GDP preliminary reading, jobless claims as well, and then Friday the PCE print, and then PMI as well. So market hasn't really cared much about PCE or inflation prints generally lately, so it seems, at least from an intraday basis. So we'll see if those have any market moving implications, but I think the big thing really is going to be Wednesday and how Nvidia reacts on earnings and what that does to the semi sector, especially the NASDAQ as well. So we'll see. We'll probably have some more decision come Wednesday in this market. So obviously last week, so we're looking at the S&P 500 right here, ES, the futures. So obviously last week we ended the week with a very nasty sell day. We had a very gross trend day down. Not really any bid on the ladder once we broke through IBL, once we offered prior day lows at 6100s. The beginning of the week is a short trading week. Beginning of the week was fairly distributive. We did actually attempt to break out of multi-week balance, multi-month balance up into the highs here. We failed that high, not especially convincingly, at least in my opinion. So going into Thursday, I should say, after we failed the highs, I wasn't really looking to be a seller. Obviously from a balance perspective, failing balance highs can potentially open the door to more aggressive selling into the lows. We didn't really see that on Thursday. We had an open drive down, and then we recovered the majority of the day on Thursday, and then overnight on Friday on the Globex session we didn't do much, and then we just had another open sell, which obviously had continuation, and we went quite further than at least I thought we would on Friday. So I think the big question here obviously is, is this a real start of something bigger, or is this potentially just a flush out? Was it OPEX related? In part obviously it was, but is this a flush out that's going to get bought right back up? And is that going to be around, Nvidia earnings, or, potentially a more tame inflation print this week for PCE? Not really sure, but there's definitely areas here that we can monitor for acceptance and lack thereof that should give us a pretty decent view on, the remainder of the week, as well as, some trades that we can structure around it. So I think the big thing that we have to note here is Friday was a multi-distribution day down. We have 4 sets of single prints that broke us away. Obviously very controlled sell that we had, and then we closed the session into the lows right around 6,020s. Primary thing for me this week is watching last week's low, so watching 6,020s if we get immediate continuation lower, and what that sets up for trades. So I'm not really biased to either side this week. I think, this market has so far been basically unkillable. So would it surprise me to see us, recover, above 6,004 or 6040s and traverse back up? Not at all. It also wouldn't really surprise me here with the manner of which we sold Friday. Wouldn't really surprise me here to see continuation down. So I'm open to anything really this week, but I think using last week's low as the primary point of reference is probably going to be the easiest thing to do here. So basically the big things I'm going to be looking for. So because we have, multiple distributions and we have multiple sets of single prints on the way down, we have some ways to gauge, early strength or weakness. So if we're offering, last week's lows, if we're below 6,020s early, whether that's Globex or whether that's, Monday open, then I think the possibility of the sell continuing is definitely there. Getting some Monday continuation on an aggressive sell day is certainly possible. So under 6,020s, if we're squarely under, if we have no ability basically to recover 6,040s and we're offering 6,020s, then I think looking down into these previous weekly low areas, down into the ETH low at 6,008s that we had, so call it 6,000, 6,008s area, underneath 6,020s. If we're squarely below 6,000s, then I think sellers are going to take control in the short term and probably take us down into retesting the gap down into 5950s. So basically look at it as no ability to recover 6,020s, probably going to sell down to 6K pretty fast, and then under 6K would be looking for a test of the 100-day moving average, whether or not we have any bounce off of that, potentially put in a low there, or if sellers are really really aggressive and trying to move the tape down, getting down into 5950s, and the expected move on the cash index actually takes us down into the RTH gap, which is still unfilled, down into 5930s. So the flip side, I think, is that if we're starting to accept back up basically over Friday's POC, as well as the first part of poor structure, this first set of single prints here, if we're starting to accept back over 45s, then I think the possibility of reversion back up is more likely on the day. So obviously, we could set up a lower high and sellers could, continue to take control or reload higher. Where I think that would happen, or at least where sellers would want to defend, would be the halfback of Friday, which would be down 6,080s, as well as this upper set of single prints right here. So if we start to accept back over 45s, then I'll look to see if we can get the long trade back up for the reversion trade, and then see what happens up here. I think from here, from 80s, I think I would want to continue to be on the long side of the trade if we're starting to bid back above 80s. If that happens, then I think the possibility of us going back up and testing the bottom of weekly value range up into 6,100, 6,107s is quite likely. And then potentially up there, we'd see a move back to 6,130s. So again, not really biased to either side. I think this week, this is more, let's see if, sellers actually get continuation for once in the last, several months, because they haven't since. We also haven't really had an RTH sell like this in quite a while. So the possibility is there for sellers to continue. But if we start seeing acceptance back above, the bottom distribution, then I think the backfill of this day is likely, and I'd be looking to see if we can get back up into 6,080s and see what happens up here and make a decision, basically. So that's it for ES. NASDAQ is basically going to be the exact same thing. So I think using last week's low down at 21,650s, which is also the 50-day moving average, basically the tick, I think it's going to be the exact same thing for me here. So if we can't accept last week's low, if we see immediate weakness, then I'll look for the move down to the prior weekly lows. So we have the RTH low of the week prior down here and do 21,550s, and then the ETH low that this turned into be the giga low that trended us up. So I think retesting this would be fairly natural if we're not accepting last week's low at 21,650s. So I'd be looking all the way down here at 420s. So below 420s, again, if this gets really nasty, below 420s, we do have a naked POC down here at 200s. That's a natural target, so I'll look to see if we can get into that. And then we also have, that giant giga buyer that we had down at 21K, which we never actually revisited in RTH. Not to say that we have to, but usually when you see, that type of size get moved in Globex, it's not uncommon to see it get retested in an RTH session. So usually I put that as a reference point for future sessions. If we do see, directionality that might take us there. So that would be like the extreme target for me, would be 21K. Obviously we have the 100-day moving average down here, down at 21,150s, but I think that 21K test is possible. The same thing goes for the NASDAQ. So again, if we're basically accepting above the, we're accepting last week's low, we're accepting inside the range, then I think the possibility of backfilling this day as well is also there. So basically, we accept last week's low, either we sweep it, sweep and rip, or if we gap up and we maintain bids above, that Friday's POC, then I think the move is going to be backfilling this poor structure, and I'll look all the way up into the 21,900s area, and then again at the 21,950s, which is almost perfectly the halfback of that day, as well as that prior daily low. So if we recover the prior daily low here that we broke down from, then I think this to me is probably going to be the same as ES. This flush out for whatever reason, OPEX related, obviously some real selling involved there too, but this flush out's more likely to me going to get bought back up, and we're probably going to revert back to the highs. So I'd use the halfbacks of the day, so the 950s and 80s as the metrics ultimately for strength on a broader market basis. And if we're back over these areas here, I think the possibility of this low sticking is there, whether or not it's from a sweep or whether or not it's from bids straight off of it. So we'll have to see. Again, very, very open to either side of what's happening here. The thing I think to keep in mind, especially if we don't have immediate sell continuation, is that big trend day downs, especially like we had on Friday, are often very emotional. Whether or not you made or lost money on that day, or whether some market participants did as well. It's just what happens a lot on days like that is that the following day, if you don't get immediate continuation, you get very choppy conditions, and you get potentially get balance, especially backfilling structure, poor structure like this, and it can turn into difficult trading conditions, and you have to be very, very careful with some of the setups that you're going to take. So oftentimes on days like we had, following days like we had on Friday, if we clean up that poor low that we have on ES, we sweep it, we bid it, if that sets up a nice long trade from the lows, I'll certainly look at that. But oftentimes on these days, I wait for IB to form in the first hour of trading, and then kind of trade around that just to see, whether or not, gauge the interest of participants on both sides. So see that IB form, and then see, is there acceptance above, below? Do we see breakaway from the initial balance directionally, or does it turn into just an absolute blender of a day? And is it something I want to wait and let resolve potentially? So that's just a suggestion going into tomorrow. Again, very open to either side. I don't have much else. Don't have much else to add other than just be careful this week. I think this is going to be a pivotal week as far as where the market is sitting right now, and I think Wednesday ultimately is going to be huge with Nvidia's earnings coming out. That's going to be very market moving. So just be careful. Good luck. Thanks.